Welcome and thank you for tuning in. This is the 2023 Question the Candidates event live from the Student Center. I'm Tony from Pi Media and I'll be chairing today's session. Pi Media and Film and TV Society have come together to put on today's sessions. Thank you to all the volunteers for making this happen. Over the next hour or so, you will hear from some of the candidates who wish to be your next activities and engagement officer. Now, before we go into further detail, just a quick description of our role. So the activities and engagement officer works to lead the union's sports, societies, and volunteering programs, from welcome fair to varsity, and of course the end of year balls. The role is here to shape the co-curricular and social experiences that students want from their union. And we have a total of 12 candidates running this year, I believe. And obviously we have 5 of our candidates here. So hopefully this question time event will give you an insight into what kind of officer these candidates could be, what kind of policies they have. We have a couple of main topics to cover. I think sort of 6 broad questions that we'll kind of go into one by one. And each candidate will kick off the discussion on one of the questions, and once the ball is rolling, I think all the other candidates will also get a chance to respond to what they've heard and talk about their own policies when it comes to these areas. So we'll keep this discussion informal, obviously. I think the gentlemen to my left and right over there are already doing a good job of making this quite informal, and we're just giving everybody a space to get their point across. So for the candidates, let's try to keep this discussion positive, and of course we're ultimately all here because we care about students at UCL, and we're trying to make their experience here a better one. So before we kick off, I will just ask all of the candidates to briefly introduce themselves and sum up briefly why they should get your vote. And how about we start from to my right? So.
Hi, my name's Chiamaka Agu, and I'm running to be Activities and Engagement Officer this year. This year, I've been Sports Officer, and in my role, I've worked with all sorts of clubs and societies to increase sport uptake at the university. And as your Activities and Engagement Officer, I'd love the opportunity to do this with all sorts of arts societies as well, to expand that across the union. Having been at UCL for 5 years as a medical student, I've experienced a lot of UCL in my time, and activities have been a core part of my time here. And I'd love to help shape somebody else's UCL experience in the same way so that they'd be happy to spend up to 6 years at UCL as well.
Thank you. I think we'll just go down this way.
Hey guys, I'm Cheryl. I'm also running for Activities and Engagement. I've done a lot of stuff for both UCL and the Student Union in my time here at uni. And honestly, I just want everyone to feel included in activities. I want them to actually be able to participate without any barriers. So I'm working to make UCL more inclusive, accessible, and diverse. I'm also targeting very specific things in my manifesto if you want to read that. That's about it.
Yep, our equine-headed friend over there.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm running for Activities and Engagement Officer to make the UCL Juggling and Circus Society great again. I've got a great 5-step plan to make this happen. Step 1, I will demand the sound signing of 100 copies of the Unabomber Manifesto. Step 2, I will establish a credit-bearing module teaching students classroom plan tactics to help the UCL Juggling and Circus Society plan on classroom plans to win awards. Step 3. What's my step 3? Wait.
I think we have a pretty good general idea.
Yeah? Okay.
So I think we can go on the left side over here.
Hi, I'm Lewis Murphy. I'm a third-year maths student. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of being your arts officer here at the Students' Union, as well as the president of Stage Crew Society and a student staff member at the activities reception. This means I've been able to work with the union at 3 very different levels, and so I know what works, I know what doesn't, and I know most of all what our clubs and societies need to make them the best they possibly can be.
Right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Seth, and I'm also running to make Juggling and Circus Society great again. I've been Master of Balls for the last year, and that means absolutely nothing. My most important policy is that I'm going to ban jazz. I'm going to have a war on jazz, and as part of that, I'm going to ban Jazz Night and demolish Phineas.
Right. We're off to a controversial start, I think. I quite like those jazz nights, as I'm sure many of our other candidates here do. So I like the fact that, Cheryl, one of the things you mentioned was talking about accessibility, right? So providing more inclusive environments for people to join societies and sort of getting rid of barriers, right? And I think definitely we have quite a striking number here. Over 20,000 students this year joined clubs and societies, which is wonderful. But I think the new strategy for student life, the idea is to increase this significantly even beyond that, right? So I think maybe we could start with you, but what do you think are some current barriers to participation at the moment, and how would you go about addressing those barriers if you were elected?
So one of the most major things I've noticed is that it's just a lot of the activities are just really far, especially for like sports trainings, and there are really a lot of bookable spaces for clubs to host any socials or events on campus. So I'm hoping to increase that. So just allowing clubs to have more spaces where they can host socials, events, etc. And I think it's also really nice to have some sort of like casual activities people just can just join. So if we just host like a card game tournament right on campus, that anyone could just come along and join spontaneously without having to like get tickets like a week in advance. Because I mean, schedules change. Like you might be busy or free. You might stumble across something you really want to join, but you might not be able to get tickets. And honestly, for accessibility and inclusion, I think a lot of it is just having more free and low-cost activities, having more activities targeted towards groups that have been excluded in the past. For example, more beginner-friendly sport sessions, and having like hijab-friendly sport sessions, or just activities in general.
Right. Yeah. So Chiamaka, do you think you have anything to add to that question?
I think Cheryl's points are great, and I 100% agree. I think there are a lot of things that can stop people from jumping into the activities that we hold here at UCL. I think one thing is actually people thinking that the activity is not quite for them. Having been sports officer, I know that you can get a lot of students who think, oh, I'm not super sporty, I'm not an Olympic athlete, therefore it's not for me. And I think just highlighting the fact that we do have a really strong beginners offering for our sports clubs already. And one of my manifesto points would be to try and make sure that we have a super strong beginners arts program as well. So I'd be advocating for working with the arts officer to produce a Bloomsbury Theatre Arts UCL show with beginners from various Arts UCL societies, such as like live music, stage crew, and UCL dance, so that you could be a complete fresh beginner, but by the time the show comes, you'd be able to work on a project and perform that in a state-of-the-art theatre. So I think just knowing that all activity at UCL is for you, regardless of your background, regardless of your ability, is super important. And the other point would be around sort of diversity and inclusion. I think sometimes it's really hard to jump into places where you may not see yourself represented as often. That's something that I've tried to work with our sports clubs this year by increasing the visibility of certain like minority backgrounds to show that there are people like you doing all this activity as well. And I think just helping to highlight that and helping to show that it doesn't matter what you want to do, you can be terrible at whatever you pick up, but you will get better if you start. I think those are the points that we need to work towards.
Yeah, I think definitely sort of getting rid of a certain degree of stigma is quite necessary. Like I think from personal experience, in year one, I was a bit hesitant to join some of the sports societies just because I felt like it was very kind of professional and everyone seemed to know what they were doing. So it was a bit daunting, So I think that is a good point in addressing that. And I think the same can be said about art societies as well, especially when you have art societies that require a certain level of training, perhaps, or background experience. And I mean, briefly, Nick, Seth, do either of you, as you've talked about a society that I feel like requires some level of skill as well in your manifestos, do you have anything to add to that in terms of making art societies more inclusive and beginner friendly? Sure.
Personally, I don't believe that all activities should be treated the same. Certain activities are superior than others. For example, at Juggling Circus Society, we are very accessible. We're in the North Cloisters every Tuesday from 7 to 9 o'clock. We're also very inclusive, unless you are Martina from Cheese Grater, in which case you're banned because she made a very mean tweet. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the North Cloisters. I think that kind of fits with one of the things Cheryl was saying earlier as well, right? About using campus spaces and the lack of that. So I think if we're able to better utilize what spaces we have, that's definitely something worth considering. While we're still on the topic of kind of accessibility and beginner friendliness, right, as it pertains to arts societies, obviously, Lewis, with your experience at Stage Crew, I think you've probably seen quite a few fresh members come in and gain experience and over time, right? So what do you think you would do on that front to kind of further make sure that arts societies are beginner friendly and more inclusive?
Absolutely. I think in Stage Crew, certainly over the past year, we've had a big push to get beginners involved and to encourage beginners to join our society. I think that is something that represents a massive barrier, certainly across art societies. For example, we've got a lot of music societies, but generally, if you don't play an instrument already, there's not really much that you can do. So I think something I'd like to do is have union-supported instrumental tuition to allow people to actually pick up new instruments and learn them, and then they can get on the stage and perform as part of our art societies. I don't think that should be a barrier to participation at UCL in the way that it is currently. And I think certainly with my experience working with Stage Crew to get more beginners into our lead roles on shows, that would be something we're really keen to push for next year across arts and sports as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think before we move on to kind of the next general topic of discussion, right? We've talked about more on the arts side, and I know that Chiamaka, you've talked about the sports side a bit more. Do any of the other candidates kind of have anything they'd want to add about sort of the sports side of the societies and making that more accessible to students regardless of their level of experience?
Oh, I've got something to say.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I come from Dodgeball Club, and it's a pretty small one compared to a lot of the bigger clubs, and we don't really get a lot of like funding or like time at some of this town. So that kind of inspired my whole thing about making use of campus space, having like physical booths that sports club could like promote, or just clubs in general could promote, especially the smaller ones, and also having like an activity idea submissions form for like anyone to just sort of be able to voice out what they want. I feel like that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I think.
Sorry, could I
No,
add
it's okay.
to that
you
point?
can add to it. Yeah.
So I think we've spoken about sports separately, and we've spoken about arts separately.
Right.
But a key point of my manifesto is like to unite the union. I don't think it has to be arts, sports, and volunteering. I think we should have a lot more crossover than we do currently. And that's something that I would be pushing for. For instance, in one of my ideas around varsity has always been marketed as like a university-wide event.
Yeah.
It's Varsity Week this week, get your tickets. But I would really like to involve Arts UCL and Team UCL to create a bigger scale varsity where we could have sort of halftime shows and an opening ceremony from various Arts UCL like student groups. And in that way, I think we could help tie arts and sports together even closer. You could come to varsity to watch your favorite student athlete take down kings. You could also come to varsity to watch your favorite like flautist, pull out a tune on the pitch as well. So I think in doing so, we would have more people come to watch. It would raise the scale of sport, but it would also, I think, help mesh the groups together in a way that would make it easier for people to cross over between them. It would make it easier for you to see, oh, like that's what the arts guys do. I want to try that out. It would make it easier for you to see you don't have to be an Olympic athlete to play sport. And I think that sort of cross collaboration tied in with volunteering as well. A lot of our sports clubs do a lot of volunteering.
Yeah.
That's what I would be looking to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. I think the kind of crossover between the different parts of the SU, it is kind of already happening to an extent. Like the Film Society, who are doing this very live stream, they are doing live streams for varsity this week, and there's commentary involved and things like that. So I think there definitely can be opportunities, even in sports settings, right, to get arts societies involved and vice versa. So that, I think, yeah, that cohesion is probably a general direction that a lot of students would like to see. Better integration across arts and sports and volunteering. Seth, yay or nay?
I'm very much in favour. I'd just like to pick up on a point about there are lots of small clubs and societies that don't get the recognition they deserve. They don't have the funding. And we could just take this money from Jazz Society. They've got so much of it. What if they just play jazz? We can just redistribute the wealth.
I see your just crusade against Jazz Night, and Jazz Society continues. Right, okay. Well, we will move on to our next kind of general topic. And I think the thing that you said earlier about uniting the union, right? I think that is actually quite a relevant point, because in a way, that's more of a challenge now, considering the fact that we not only have these different dimensions to the student union, where you have arts, volunteering, sports, but we also have an entirely new campus, right? We have UCL East, which obviously it's just kind of coming into its own this year. A lot of programs are starting there, and with that, of course, a lot of society activity is going to be starting there as well. So I think to all of you then, there's a real challenge of how would you go about establishing a connection between everything that's pre-established here at the Bloomsbury campus and everything at the UCL East campus as far as kind of clubs and societies go. Maybe, do you think, Lewis, would you want to start with this one?
Absolutely. I think UCL East campus is a fantastic opportunity for clubs and societies to expand the reach of their activities. We've got the building that's opened this year, and then we've got an even bigger space opening in the near future. And it would be a really great thing to have all this new space unlocked at a new campus. We've done some excellent work this year with the UCL East grant, making it easier for clubs and societies to get their equipment, get their kit up there. I know we had the UCL Leaders Conference up at UCL East, and that was really, really successful. So I think we just need to continue to market the UCL East grant to clubs and societies and make it easier to get funding, to move equipment, to move kit up to UCL East if necessary, to put on activities to get such a large proportion of UCL student body involved in the Students' Union. Because with being in Stratford, I think it can be very easy to feel that you're disconnected from the Bloomsbury campus. But as the Students' Union, we want to unite everybody. That's sort of our role. And so I think it would be very important and a really fantastic opportunity to do that with so much going on up in Stratford.
Yeah, I think definitely the spaces are a big part of that, because obviously a couple candidates at this point, we've talked about kind of the lack of area on the main campus at points, right, for activities. And I think with UCL East, there are definitely opportunities there. And I think with the potential of kind of integrating across these two campuses, it might actually make things easier logistically for a lot of different societies. So I know, Cheryl, you've talked about UCL East in your manifesto, and you talked about, on a practical level, when we're talking about kind of closing the gap, you mentioned this, like a shuttle bus proposal, I believe. So do you want to elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I would have to see what I can do with like the budget and actually become a technical part of it.
Of course, yeah.
But the idea of something like physically closing the distance between the two,
Right.
I feel like that would allow people on main campus to utilize the facilities we have on UCL East. Like the sports stuff, we have there, the study spaces. And I mean, I've got a couple of friends over at UCL East, and they have to travel to Euston just to like participate in like sports.
Right.
So having a shuttle bus would actually make it a lot more accessible for them in terms of like cost, time. They can relax a bit on the bus itself. That will make the two campuses a lot more integrate it. Even if we don't do anything else, I feel like the shuttle bus will at least like help a little bit with that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think on the points that Lewis was talking about earlier about sort of the societies being able to essentially both utilize both spaces and also kind of collaborate across the two campuses, do you have anything to add to that part?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to UCL East as one of the welcome ambassadors a couple times. And from what I've seen, honestly, I think a lot of people like being not like isolated, but they enjoy like knowing their own campus, and they might be a little more hesitant to join. So definitely, I think like when you mentioned about like the funding, like actually marketing, that would really help with it. Yeah.
So Chimaka, with what you were talking about with the expanding the shows such as Varsity, right, and creating these programs within that can accommodate all the different sections of the SU, do you think that that could extend to UCL East as well as a chance for them to sort of be more involved with activities?
Yeah, I think definitely on the larger scale events, it would be really easy to incorporate UCL East into some of them. For instance, our hockey team play their varsity event at Lee Valley Hockey and Tennis Center, so that's right on UCL East campus. I think the thing with UCL East is we should work to integrate the Bloomsbury campus and UCL East campus, but we should also work to have UCL East be a sustainable campus in and of itself. I think students at UCL East shouldn't need to trek to Bloomsbury every time they want to play football with their friends or they like want to hang out at the SU bar. I think we need to incentivize our clubs and societies to either have splinter branches off at UCL East or to support the students at UCL East to create their activity structure as well, so that maybe for the larger scale events such as Varsity, Welcome Fair, like the big UCL core activity, we would have them merged in one place. But I don't think that UCL East should just sort of be a place that students have to commute from to get to the hub that UCL is. UCL should be Bloomsbury and it should be UCL East at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's a good. I think that's definitely a good sentiment. Probably something everyone who's at UCL can appreciate. Before we move on to our next topic, Nick, Seth, does the idea of having separate branches across the campuses, is that something that you were considering?
While I do like the idea of a shuttle bus, I think a tunnel would be better. And then we could have like, I don't know, a minecart down there or something that people could use to go between it on. I think, yeah. I just like that more, a railway.
Yeah, I think there might be bigger concerns than just budget if that was the proposal we'd go with. Yeah. So I think our next conversation topic is definitely more of a serious note. Because I think with events like Varsity and with massive activities such as some of the cultural events even, right? They obviously can be a lot of fun. They can be a great chance for tons of students across the student body to get to know each other. But obviously with that, there also comes safety concerns, right? Specifically when you look at events and you look at incidents that have happened and incidents that can happen in terms of spiking incidents, for example, or even sexual misconduct. And I think it is definitely something that on an institutional level, right, the SU has a responsibility to acknowledge the safety of their students. So on that point, how would you go about improving the safety of events and ensuring that incidences like this don't happen? I think we can probably start with Chiamaka.
Okay, so obviously this is a big question that would take a long time to actually solve. I think that the Students' Union definitely has a duty to ensure that all of our students are safe at all of our events, in all of our spaces, and in all of our sort of splinter activity. For instance, we have our sports night at Scala, in which case that would be a union-run event in which students would need to know that they feel safe at those events. So I think one thing that's super important would be to have a clear reporting system. We do have UCL Report and Support. Should anything happen, you can also report things directly to the union in those cases. But I think our safety structures need to be better advertised so that people know exactly what to do in situations such as these. They should be told directly to the club presidents and clubs and society presidents in training, so that if anything happens and you're a member of a club, you know you can go to your club's leadership and your club's leadership can direct it straight to the union. I think there should be closed loop communication on that, so that when you go and you tell the union this has happened, they can give you a realistic timeline of when things will be solved. They can tell you how your case is going to be managed. And there should be enough safety in the system for you to report things anonymously, should you not feel so comfortable to raise them publicly, and for you to be able to report them and have things followed up as well. In terms of, say, like disciplinary action against individuals or clubs when things like this happen, that would be chaired by the activities officer. I've had to attend one of these as sports officer as well, so I do know a lot about how that process runs. But I think that one of the key things that we should be doing is making sure that people know that should something terrible like this happen, this is who you can go to for support, this is how your matter will be handled, and this is how we're going to get back to you, and this is how we're going to solve this so that it doesn't happen again in the future. I mean, people should be able to know that when things happen, actions is going to be taken, and I would hope that you would feel confident in telling me, telling the union about anything that would happen in any of these spaces, so that we can work together to make sure they don't happen again.
I think definitely it is, I agree with you in that it's a very big problem in terms of it's several problems within one, really, right, on a whole scale. So Cheryl, do you think you have anything you'd want to contribute to your solution on this, or what you'd work towards?
Yeah, I mean, building on Chiamaka's solution. I mean, obviously she covered most of the points already, but I also think that looking at what we have currently, we provide a lot of like safety and welfare training to obviously welfare officer, to the president, to treasurer. But I think it should be extended to every member of the committee so they can all work together. And if anyone feels uncomfortable talking to, president, treasurer, welfare officer, they have other people that they can reach out to, people who are technically in a position of power, to help them to reach out to the student union. And I mean, obviously, I know the student union has been pushing for club members to do trainings, and they do really encourage a higher percentage of engagement with it, but I don't think it's currently very successful because it relies on the committee members to push them. And it's also up to the committee members as to how much they want to do that. So, I mean...
Sorry, was there a point you wanted to...
No, let Cheryl finish, but I'd like
Sure,
to...
Yeah,
I was going to say that we should probably come up with more incentives and not just stuff that's like, oh yeah, that would be beneficial for the club, like we're going to give a grant to your club if a certain member of members actually do it. I mean, it should be something that involves benefiting club members and not just like on the awareness part.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, you've touched on another aspect of the problem, I think, because you have things the SU can do on a broader, more institutional level, but then you have things that you would encourage or even incentivize specific society members and committee members to do, right? So it's kind of different levels of tackling that problem. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, so on that point, as sports officer this year, I've made the active bystander training and the tackling sexual violence training key points in our club development plan. So clubs are currently incentivized for having their whole committee complete that training session, which I think has been like a positive step to put that on the club's radar, that that's something that they should be looking to do. But to build on the point, I think it ties into my last one that at the end of the day, even though we've trained these committee members, they are still students, and there's only so much training that I think you can give to a student to be able to handle a situation like that. I think we need clear designated members of staff who you can go straight to be like, this has happened, help me with this. I mean, there are huge issues to placed on your president, even though they've had president's training. Having done president's training, I know sort of the scale of it.
Yeah.
And I think while your president should be there to support you and support anybody in any of these situations, the president themselves and the welfare officers deserve support from staff as well, to know that when things like this happen, there's a clear, like, well-identified adult who's been
Yeah.
trained in all of these to help them manage the situation effectively as well.
And just a whole set of procedures involved.
Yeah.
So, Lewis, I know as a society president, obviously you've gone through said training, right? And I'm sure in your experience leading the society, you've kind of had experience with dealing with issues like this as well. So from that perspective, do you think that's kind of influenced how you view these issues and what your kind of policies would be?
Absolutely. I think there's been some really great points made, both by Cheryl and Chiamaka. The active bystander training and the tackling sexual violence training that we have on offer at the moment, they're really, really great courses, and I think it's very important that we advertise it broadly to committee members. I know that Chiamaka's done a fantastic job as sports officer this year with expanding that and making it part of the Club Development Awards. I think we'd like to see this also expanded across societies to encourage committee members from arts and general interest societies to get involved as well and complete this training. I think as a society president, there's been a few times where people have raised concerns to me and have said, sort of tack on at the end, oh, but what are they going to do about it? Or like, there's no point, it's just a little thing. But I think it's really important that society members and union members in general are able to feel like we will do something about it, we will listen to you, and we do care. And so we need to make our processes more transparent regarding this, so that, as has been said already, there's a clear time frame for responses, there's clear dedicated staff contacts that you can get in touch with if, say, you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel supported by your committee. It's really important that we make people aware that we are there to help them, and that's what we want to do at the end of the day.
So I think before we kind of wrap up the entire discussion, there's one more area that I'd like to touch upon. So as we've said, obviously, the safety is a long-term problem, right? And it requires long-term solutions. Another more long-term thing that has been discussed more in the past year, I think, is about sustainability when it comes to clubs and societies, right? As UCL, well, I mean, as the world really, but as UCL specifically is pushing towards a more climate-friendly, a more long-term sustainable agenda, right, across its policies. I think the SU definitely is starting to push its societies to reflect that more as well. So I guess the question is then, what would you change or continue developing to make clubs and societies more sustainable? And I mean, Nick, I could start with you actually. Do you feel like there are any good ways of making clubs more sustainable other than cutting jazz?
Sure. That is a big part of it, actually. But I believe UCL East is a great opportunity in progressing sustainability at the union, because we could convert UCL East into a massive cheesecake. And it's a great opportunity for the dairy industry, because if you look at what happened in America in the 80s, they had a cheesecake storing about 1.4 billion tons of cheese.
Wow.
If we could recreate that, it would be a great source of biofuel for UCL if we use it.
Okay. Do any of our other candidates have solutions that are more friendly for people who can't eat dairy, I guess? Cheryl, do you want to start? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's all right. You're all right.
I mean, one way that I would tackle that would be to increase the amount of bookable space that we have on campus and increase the facilities that we have closer to home. So one of my manifesto points is to push for more sports facilities and a home for Team UCL, where we can base all of our sports grounds in one place and our students can travel to and from that home ground instead of having to travel all over London to train. And the same would be for arts, to increase the amount of time that they get in Bloomsbury Theatre, to increase the performance spaces that we have available in and around campus. And that way, if students aren't traveling huge distances, then that would make their travel more sustainable and also make it quicker, make it cheaper, and make it more accessible for them to join activity. So I think adapting the spaces that we do have and ensuring that they're used well, can stop us having to do that.
Lewis, do you think you want to add to that discussion a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sustainability is really, really important. It's sort of the crux of what we're all doing right now in UCL and the Students' Union. I think in order for clubs and societies to become more sustainable, as well as things like reducing transport emissions, the wonderful cheese cave suggestion, I think we need to look at the small improvements that can be made for individual clubs and societies to reduce their emissions. I think, for example, like with Stage Crew, we have this year transitioned away from using like tape. We've moved on to Velcro ties. That's plastic waste that we've sort of got rid of, really. And I think we should be prioritising grant applications for clubs and societies that are specifically like targeted at improving their sustainability for that society. I think it's a really important thing, a really easy thing for us to do. We need to encourage them to apply, and we need to prioritise those applications when we get them in.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a smaller scale change, but also something that's probably more implementable across different types of societies. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that you recovered, Cheryl. You think you're prepared to talk about your ideas now?
I mean, I just have to clarify, I'm not lactose intolerant, which is really funny. And honestly, I was going to say that as individuals, I mean, obviously, we have a lot of ideas on what it should be like policy-wise and what it should be like in a top-down way.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for a lot of clubs, I mean, they differ. We have so many clubs and societies. They differ in terms of what they offer, what they do, what materials they need and make use of. And I think stuff like this, ideas on how to make UCL more sustainable, it should come from the people involved in the activity themselves. And that's where my the activities, ideas and missions and feedback form, that's where it comes in. We need to incentivize people to actually engage in, submitting ideas, have a space for them to be able to give us feedback on what they need, what they want, what sort of grants they might need, where we could change policy to make something even better for sustainability. And I mean, I would take a bottoms up approach on this, honestly, because I don't think one person at the top can think of everything. Even if we work as a team, we can't think of everything that people need. So that's where I would.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think like the bottoms up approach is really effective in this case. And I think to support Cheryl's points, I think we could do better at training our clubs on exactly how to make their activity more sustainable. I think, our clubs, particularly our sports clubs, will have like a lot of like a social element to their activity. They'll have a training element to their activity and the match day as three different areas where we could potentially look at, do we want to be recycling our kit throughout Team UCL? Do we want to be eliminating single-use plastics across our bars and our social venues as well? But I think giving the clubs more training to help them identify the ways in which they can implement these changes would do wonders to help them actually address these issues. We have training sessions for various other things throughout our like club and society activity, and I think adding sustainability training to help people figure out what to do would go a long way. And in doing so, one of my other points is to create a Committee Connect platform, in which case we would have like a platform on the website, which is your one-stop shop for all things committee. All of your different training modules are in one place. Your contacts to like who do I go to staff-wise for different things, all in one place. And an integrated chat feature as well, so that clubs can collaborate more easily. And I think through the Committee Connect platform, we could add training on how to make your club more sustainable. In your chat section of the platform, you could speak to other clubs and say, hey, we have this idea for how to make it more sustainable. What do you think? What are you guys doing? Like, how can we all work together to figure out how to make our sports clubs more sustainable, how to make our art societies more sustainable? And I think with all of us sharing ideas on how to better our practice, that's going to be the fastest way for us to be able to achieve actual change.
Yeah. I think that's something I've just noticed across today, right? And across the different candidacy proposals that you guys have talked about is the idea of obviously implementing certain kind of top-down policies and having ideas that can be implemented on a union level, but fundamentally it's more so about individual societies and groups and making sure that these are things that can fit their needs, right? So that they can look after their members better and hopefully develop programs that people are satisfied with. Yeah, so I think that's a good point for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for all the candidates here, Chiamaka, Cheryl, Lewis, and of course our two horse-headed friends, Nick and Seth. Thank you for being here and taking part in this discussion. I've certainly learned many things, such as the fact that I probably won't be seeing you at Jazz Night anytime soon. And I hope that those of you watching have learned some things too. And obviously, you know, all jokes aside, we have covered quite some relevant issues here from both the two campuses and figuring out a way to bring people together like that, as well as addressing long-term issues such as safety and sustainability. So I think it really goes to show how important this year's race is, and it's illustrative of the kind of challenges next year's sabbatical team will be tackling. All that to say, it is very, very important that you vote. It will make a difference. Voting is open from today, Monday, the 13th of March, to Friday, the 17th of March. You can vote online now, but don't worry if you forget. There will be reminders throughout the week, but I suggest you do it as soon as possible. If you want to learn more about the candidates here or the other candidates that are running for this position but did not make it to today's discussion, you can either send them a message or meet them in person at the Candidates Fair, which I believe is happening in the cloisters on Tuesday. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching.